How are you, folks? Glad to be here with you and to be able to show a little bit of OneNote. Thank you very much to Mark and to Darren. I'm busy, Darren, taking notes. My hands worn out, taking all the creative notes and all the ideas down for what we're going to do when we go back. Darren's 100% right. I'm going to show a little bit of how I use apps integrated within Teams. And I think I'd be doing a disservice to OneNote to not give you an idea and a flavor of what OneNote can do and then how it integrates into Teams. I can see from some of the questions coming through, and we'll get an opportunity to look at the Q&A after this session, but I can see people asking that kind of question about where pupils can upload work and access work within Teams. So for me, before we started using Teams last year, OneNote was integral to my learning and teaching, and it very much is a blank slate. It's a flip chart, and for me, what I want to be able to do is to kind of spark curiosity in my students and unleash them to be able to kind of access the learning for themselves. So even in the normal routine, the day-to-day routine, I wanted my students going onto the OneNote and always, if they wanted to progress in their learning, they wanted to do a little bit more, I wanted to encourage them to do that. So for me, OneNote is the ultimate flip chart. It's the ultimate interactive whiteboard. And if you like, it's a glorified modern day version of the overhead projector. Okay, so particularly now when I'm doing online lessons in real time, I want my pupils to be able to see what we have on the screen, to be able to work through activities together and to be able to navigate. My subject is RE and at A level. I teach the philosophy component, and that can be quite heavy. And for me, the ability to be able to slow it down and to break it down for students is really opened up by OneNote. And people ask me quite a lot. People are intimidated because when you open it up, it is essentially a blank slate, a white slate. You have the opportunity to do what you want to do within that. So my kind of starting point is to think, well, what do you want to do in your online lessons with your students? What do you want to share with them? And what do you want them to be able to access? And when you have that kind of vision, then you go to the blank canvas that is OneNote and you start to put that together. So essentially what you're seeing on screen now is something that I've put together, a mix of kind of images and text that is literally laid on in the same way you would do a Microsoft Word document or a PowerPoint. And really, in essence, it's taken the best out of both of those, the best out of a PowerPoint and a Word document. And you're able to annotate over the top of that as you would on your interactive whiteboard in school, but you're able to do that in real time. One of the things I love in my subject is the ability to get articles from a magazine, and instead of having to photocopy those out and for the pupils to read it once and then to discard, the ability to be able to share those in the OneNote and to navigate it and talk it through with the students in real time is really impressive. And I don't think photocopiers even really capture some of the resources that are out there for us to use in our learning and teaching. So, and again, you know, most subjects, their ability to connect to modern day and to newspaper articles and to be able to share those is hugely important. And again, my subject is traditional. You know, we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. Really, essentially, we're looking at new ways to share and to communicate essentially what is still traditional pedagogy. And for me, the ability to be able to scan a couple of pages out of a chapter and to really to delve into that with the students and to be able to highlight the key bits, to be able to read through it with them as we would in class, those are still essential elements of learning and teaching. So we're not just hopping onto the internet and changing everything we do. Essentially, we're finding clean, easy, simple ways and even more effective ways of sharing those resources with our students. And that's what OneNote allows us to do. So again, you'd see here my ability when I'm teaching an online lesson to zoom into the paragraph, to zoom out. I ask my students to read through with me and we're able to work through that. And again, it is essentially quite traditional. One of the things I love, and I'm just showing you why we have it here, is you can right click a scanned image and copy the text straight out of that. So whether that's a photograph or whether that's using your scanner or photocopier to do that, you can actually take from that static image all of the text and be able to copy and paste that. And that would save a lifetime if people are trying to create new resources for online. That very simple trick, available only really in OneNote, is there, and I can copy and paste that text. I've squeezed it in there just to be able to show you today, but that is a real time saver in the ability to generate and to recapture. I'm very lucky that the chief examiner for my subject, or the chair of the board of examiners for my subject, when he was retiring, found folders, and I had really good typewritten texts from some of the scholars now that would cost a fortune to buy their books, but they had typewritten articles for newspapers and magazines decades ago, but the content is still really important, and the ability to bring that kind of material to life again is so important. One of the things now, again, we're talking about blended learning, and I know that's kind of the buzz phrase at the minute, but online learning, and not emergency online learning, but traditional online learning for people who've been kind of using this to kind of enhance their traditional classroom teaching. We've always had paper booklets in the classroom, but we complement that with our ability to digitize that on the interactive whiteboard and through the OneNote. So one of the things that I like to be able to do is to put up our own student pupil booklets, and to be able to have that on the screen. In the classroom, we would have been doing this on the interactive whiteboard while they were reading in front of them and annotating their own, and to be able to annotate that in real time. Now, obviously, the lessons have transported online, but the kind of the theory and the thinking behind it is exactly the same. I want to be able to go through the material with my students and to be able to do that. So OneNote's been around for quite a few years, and I suppose it's a bit like Marmite. Some people love it, some people hate it. I think the real thing is that when you were using OneNote in the past, there were 2 or 3 stages to setting up a OneNote, to sharing it with your students. And the beauty of Teams, and the real clincher, is that Teams now does this for you. When you set up a team, your OneNote's set up and it's ready to go. There is no second or third steps. Everything is there ready for you to go, and you take it at your own pace. You might decide only to share 2 or 3 pages to get started, and then you might choose to kind of evolve it. But I would give that advice. I would give that advice to start slow, start about how you share some documents within the OneNote as a kind of a flip chart for your students. So here, the same pages that I showed you a moment ago, we have. And the students have access to this anytime, anywhere. We talk about anytime, anywhere learning and this seamless classroom. So if back in normal routine, I'd be teaching something in the classroom, and then I'd be saying to my students, right now, when you go down to study, I want you to take the next 2 or 3 pages, and they take out their mobile device, whether it's their phone, whether it's the tablet or laptop, or whether they're go to the library and use the computers. They're able to continue on that lesson instantly, seamlessly, or if they want to do it at home and recap what we've done during class, they were always able to do that. And the same principle applies to online learning. One of the things that I'm keen to get across is I love technology. I'm not an IT specialist. I'm an RE teacher, and I kind of think that we haven't updated our textbook in over 2,000 years. We're probably the subject that's quite traditional in many senses. But what I love about it is that we get to, rather than digitizing everything and forcing the students to do all their learning, Teams can be a one-stop shop or a home hub that allows them to access the activity and then to come offline and to be able to learn without a device anywhere near them, and to be able to express their creativity. And really, essentially, Teams becomes the method in which you communicate to the student communicates what they've achieved in their learning back to you, but not everything has to be online. And particularly when we think about shared devices at home and things like that, this is a key point. And OneNote really gives you the ability to be able to do that. Now, from my point of view, I do a lot of professional development and helping teachers get on board. One of the things they ask me is, how can students submit photographs of their work without it all being ski-whiff and skewed? Well, OneNote is that. OneNote is that blank slate where they're able to integrate their work and take photographs of their work, and you're able to give it feedback really quickly and instantly. And you can see how it opens up online learning beyond the digital. So, and allows pupils to be creative and use their talents. What I'm going to show you in this next little section is how you would use the assignment feature integrated with OneNote to create remote learning lessons. And we talk about asynchronous learning, where you're giving the students the opportunity to be able to work on a task over a particular period of time. So you might set a task on a Tuesday and hope that it's completed for Friday afternoon. Okay, and the students are able to take their time to work their way through that task, and that's something that OneNote and Teams integrated together is very good at doing. So I can see here that I have 22 marked and returned to the students, and if I click in through the assignments, everything is assigned as such. I can see a remote learning activity. Quite topical in that it's on prejudice and discrimination. And really what I like to do in this is I like to set it up for the students. I like to give them a little pep talk to show them the big picture of where they're going in their learning, really convince them of why this activity is important. They shouldn't just rush through it, but they should try and take their time and reflect on some of the more important questions and topics. I try to make it interactive, so rather than the students having to write copious amounts, really what they're doing here is the process of learning. They're applying the key words and dragging and dropping them to the correct section. I'm able in an instant to see whether my student knows whether those key terms match up or not, and I'm able to work out that they've processed that understanding. And again, students can type short answers or they can fill in the blanks. And really what I've done is I've evolved active learning activities from within the classroom to a remote learning activity online. And I think that particularly for GCSE and of that kind of age group, that you're really looking for key structured lessons where deep learning occurs. Okay, so high structure that allows for deep learning, and the students know exactly what they have to do to complete that learning activity well. I'm able to give feedback, and again, teachers ask me all the time. They say that one of the kind of the big downsides of online learning is the volume of marking and correction and feedback, and how do you do that swiftly and quickly? Well, Teams gives you the rubric. Obviously, other platforms give you a rubric as well, but I can annotate on the left-hand side directly from within Teams. I can put my tick, I can write what I need to do. I can also give them a very quick feedback mark, and then I can also tailor an individual comment in the box for the feedback as well. So they're getting a quick mark, scores out of 5, just for being able to do that activity. There's not a huge amount for me to feedback there, other than to pass it on. But what I can see is by evolving to the next remote learning activity, the progression of learning. And again, using OneNote, I'm not creating something brand new each time. I'm just evolving it slightly. So we're using the same 2 or 3 activities at the start of each lesson, and the students get into a comfortable routine of what they're expected to do. They're practicing their key words through a Quizlet app and the links there. They have the ability to use the student booklet that we would normally use in class, and it's just printed in here as a PDF. They can fill in the blanks, and we can work through this together. Now, we would do this online as an online lesson, but then the students would then, after the lesson, go through and do their personal copy of the work. And I do think whatever clever way you think of for asynchronous learning, students don't just want work handed out to them or extended out to them. They want that personal touch. They want that sense of connection and belonging to the school. And there's great wee ways of being able to do that as well online, where you can kind of communicate with the students as you would in the class and set that activity up for them. So I would do kind of a series of online lessons that evolve each one, and it takes the work out. And the beauty of this is you can share it amongst the department. You can use it each year, and the students know exactly what they're working through at each stage of this learning. You're able to integrate in YouTube videos, be able to take little snippets from the textbook that might reinforce a point, and so on. But the students aren't having to navigate outside of this window. They're not having to go and trawl the internet or open up links in an external way. They're able to get in here, watch very active and interactive lessons, and really kind of bring that learning to life so they can understand it and get into that. And again, the fact that they know exactly that all they have to do on that page is go through each stage of the remote learning activity in order to satisfy that learning opportunity. And again, the feedback is exceptionally quick. In Teams, you can actually do batch feedback and send the whole class back in one go if you want to. So I return the work to the student. They get it instantly. They don't have to wait for me to mark all of the class to return that. I can fly through that very quickly. Now, in the window you're seeing here is where I step it up a level for A level. And I suppose what we're doing at the minute is we're teaching the new A level. Okay, so we took the opportunity after Easter in term 3 to begin what we would have normally done in September with the students. So we're not we're not doing kind of a dry run. Really, essentially we are, and because we've been using Teams and OneNote during the year, that has given me kind of a foot up to be able to advance on to next year's course with them. And you can see the kind of the progress of the work that they're doing, that is broken down to very simple activities, and each one of these is just assigned. You don't have to think of a Teams assignment as something, a big essay. It really is any work that you're assigning to them and they hand back. And it's just that kind of ebb and flow and constant progression of online learning. As I go through here, we'll click into one and to be able to see. And this would be an essay. And again, a lot of teachers are asking me about feedback and how to quickly feedback. Well, I think that all the kind of research and all the kind of work we've done in school about giving feedback over the past 3 to 4 years has been about getting the students to do it first, essentially asking them to self-assess their own work before they submit it. And I think all of those values stand true to online learning. You know, we don't have to change things radically just because it goes on to a digital medium. And if blended learning is going to work, we're going to blend the things that work in the classroom and just lift it. So for me, I want the students to go through here. I can know instantly if a student where they are in their learning by how much they've been able to include in their essay once they've self-assessed it. And then I'm able to use the rubric to kind of give them a general band that their essay is laid into. I'm able to annotate it in real time and be able to mark it as I would a paper essay. And that's quite an easy thing to do within Teams, to use the annotation function. And then hopefully, once I finish placing a few ticks on the essay, I'm able to give the student tailored feedback specific to their essay in the feedback box. And then I'm able to return that with a score and the students get it in real time. So again, I would be integrating all of this through OneNote into Teams, okay? And there's plenty of ways, and we could do more training on that. But again, I'm still holding on and holding steadfast to the ability for students to plan their work before they submit it to me, to submit the first draft, and for me to be able to mark over. Obviously, this was done during class in real time, where they were able to submit a paper essay. And then the second draft, I expect to see that improvement. I expect to see in their OneNote and in their e-portfolio how they've taken on board that advice and made it better. And one of the things I think is really good for speeding up feedback is using online to create collective feedback. And I'm going to show you that in the next little bit of this session as well. So I like to be able to, when I'm marking, to be able to give comments and then to kind of shape together. And so what I do when I'm marking, I have 2 A-level, 2 lower 6th classes and 2 upper 6th classes, and there's a fair amount of assessment and feedback that goes with that. So when I'm marking an essay, I do keep a scrap of paper beside me, and I write down all the typical things that students do well that makes an essay really good, and I write down lots of things that the students could improve on and kind of common mistakes or common misconceptions. And that's great. That's old school. I take a photograph of that, I put it up, and when I'm giving the feedback to the students, I'm giving them the oral feedback, but using the visual prompt on OneNote to guide that. And then, as I said, you know, I would talk to students through this. I would kind of elaborate on what they should collectively be doing as part of their feedback. But the beauty of OneNote is everything evolves, everything moves from one year to the next. So the longer you use it, the more you kind of build up. So the next year after that, I take my handwritten notes, and I'm not creating extra work for myself. But before I submit, before I send out that essay, I flag up to them, do you know what, last year, here were some of the typical mistakes that students made. Let's try and eliminate those before we get started. And this year, let's look at some of the things that made those essays stand out. And that, again, it makes my teaching role much easier if I'm able to do that. So those are great ways. I said that's the beauty of OneNote. The notes always stay there. You can go back to next year and you can work through all of that. Now, I'm with Darren, although I was about 5 years behind Darren when it came to sways. They didn't sway me, no pun intended, but in Teams, I think they found their home. I think they found their space. And again, for asynchronous learning, but again, also just to reinforce and consolidate what goes on in the lesson, the ability to create an animated PowerPoint. And this, what you're seeing in front of you here, is an animated PowerPoint that's embedded as a video into the Sway, and using all the tricks that Sway has in terms of flashcards and learning prompts. And it's just another option and another tool to present learning online, rather than, the last thing we want to do is get online and lecture and kind of return to the didactic teaching. We want to be able to kind of break up that learning so that the students can get it. And Darren's 100% right. When you can do a minute or two of teaching and then pause and allow the students to get engaged, where they have to go on and then process that newly acquired knowledge. That's the only way that I believe that students can really progress in their learning, is when they acquire new information online or remotely, that they're immediately able to apply it into a context and situation where they know if they've understood that point, and if they haven't, then they get to rewind and go back to the start. So something as simple as 3 or 4 questions that self-assess within Microsoft Forms to submit it. The pupils can see their results, and they can see exactly the questions they got right, the questions that maybe they got wrong, and even build in explanations of why it's correct or why it's incorrect. And again, that's allowing students to kind of take control of their own learning. And as I said, none of this, one of the most overlooked Office 365 tools is PowerPoint. In all of this, PowerPoint is, for me, the greatest of all of Microsoft's tools, and it finds its place in Teams, where you can create kind of interactive learning videos very quickly and very easily to do that. But 2 more wee things to show you. Again, in the spirit of reducing feedback, in the spirit of giving pupils meaningful activities that encourage that deeper learning, I like to use the Wiki. And again, I would not have been a big fan. Wikis have been around for probably the guts of 2 decades, but certainly were quite popular, wikis and blogs. And it just wouldn't have been my cup of tea. But within the context of this team, and within the context of the channels broken down, it's a great space for students to collaborate. It's a great space for students to peer assess the work that's been put there. Now, this is year 11 students, and this is the work that they're doing. So they're not doing huge PowerPoint research where, it's mainly pictures and not necessarily huge amounts of quality information. Here they're focusing on the information and making sure that it's refined, and they know that it's going to be seen by their peers, so they're making sure that it's pretty on the money as far as the research is concerned. And that's a great addition. So instead of having 30 pieces of work to look through, I have 6. And again, I know as well that the other students are equally reading through this and applying it to their work as well. So that brings me almost to the end, okay? Almost to the end. But what I've done so far is showed you a lot of things that I would have used in the classroom before lockdown, before kind of 100% exclusive remote teaching. One of the things that I have rediscovered since doing online teaching has been the introduction of Kahoot. And to put this in context, Kahoot for me was a great way of introducing students to a topic or breaking up a double lesson. I think of last 2 on a Thursday, and believe it or not, at one stage I had a triple last on a Friday afternoon with lower 6th. I wouldn't wish that my worst enemy, let alone on lower 6th. And one of the ways we used to break that up and kind of re-G ourselves up in the learning was to play a Kahoot at different stages of the lesson. And so when the online learning happened and I was going on to online calls, suddenly we've lost our classroom, which is for me the safe space that I've created, with all the social cues that you're using to encourage pupils to take a risk, to want to answer out to a question, to have that confidence to speak out and ask questions in front of their peers. Suddenly that was gone, and I noticed that when I was doing online lessons, that students were a little bit more apprehensive than they would have normally been. Now remember, I've been using Teams, I've been using OneNote, they were kind of very au fait with that. It really came down that because we weren't in the classroom, we didn't have the dynamics that we needed to encourage participation as much as possible. So I really started to think about this. I started to think about, how can I get the students to participate more in the lessons? And I thought back, what do I do in the classroom to G them up, to kind of whip them into participating and engaging, particularly in an afternoon session? And I thought, you know what? They love nothing more than Kahoot. I always think if you feel like you're pulling teeth, pull out a Kahoot. Now, Kahoot is free. There is a premium version that is free to all teachers while lockdown is happening, okay? But all of the features, or most of the features that you see in this, are free to teachers to be able to use. And they have integrated into Teams. So again, you're not taking them outside of Teams. I think that's where complications happen, when students are across many different platforms trying to do their learning. The fact is, Kahoot is now integrated within Teams. It's one sign-on, so you don't have to log in and off. It's your Microsoft sign-in. And I can press all the quizzes in the middle of an online Meet Now session, and I can just assign it as a classic, and we're going to play this online. So this comes up on the screen as you see it now, and the students have their mobile device, and they're able to start engaging with me and kind of building up that participation. So one of the things I like to do is assess where they are in their learning journey, assess how they feel about the online learning. Now I can see this is probably getting a wee bit jittery because it's playing, but they're able to give me their opinion of how much they're enjoying it, or how much they really want to return back to the way it was, and so on. And I can see that the answers kind of build up steadily as they go. Other types of polls you can see in the course of a lesson I like to look at is, tell me how much you understand. So if we've just done 15 minutes, is it easy to understand? Is it clearer now than it was before? Or do you want me to go back and look at it again? If I say to a class, do you understand that? There'll be silence. No one will want to say, no, I don't understand it. If I introduce the Kahoot, I can see, do you know what? The vast majority get it, but there's a small number who may want me to revisit it. I also like to build up a winning, Alex Ferguson talks about building up a winning mentality. Small wins build up their confidence, true or false questions about something, and suddenly most of the class are feeling good about it. And maybe again to introduce some of the quiz aspects to test their previous lessons and see how well they're getting. I like the idea of Kahoot having the dual coding again, where they can kind of connect some images with the new learning that they're having. And then I get to the stage, once I've built up that confidence, once I've built up that high energy, once I've built up their kind of attention to lock in on this learning, that's when I introduce the small bit of new knowledge, okay? That's the right space to introduce what is quite difficult. You see this here. This is philosophy and the technicalities of pedantic religious language. This would throw most people. So we're going to introduce it and scaffold it and build it up slowly by using the slide function within Kahoot. So very slowly, we go through this, we talk it out. And again, you can see that if you're online and that's all you have to focus on, you're breaking it down into a piece that is manageable for the students, and the students are able to begin to process. Now, again, once we've gone through 2 or 3 bits and the pupils are probably at their maximum capacity, I'm going to check for their understanding. Okay, so I'm just going to evolve it ever so slightly, and I'm going to ask them now on their devices to work out and tell me the answer. So based on the slide before, they might need the picture reveal as a wee bit of differentiation, wait until it reveals and they make the connection between what we had learned. But they're able to show me whether or not they understand it. And then I get the answers in real time and I go, do you know what, most people have got that, but maybe I'll go back and clarify one more time. And again, it's not just always about multiple choice and guessing. Sometimes you can throw it down and really see whether or not students fully understand what you did in the previous lesson and you've introduced again, and get them to type the answer in. But again, it's the revelation to me in real time of where they're at in the learning. So I can go back and double check with them and quadruple check with them that they fully understand that key piece of knowledge that has been introduced to the course. So that's, and you see in this one, hopefully it shows the result in 1 wee second. Oh, 8 people got it right. Sorry. And actually, that's important for me as a teacher. If I've got 40 people on the call, 2 classes together, and only 8 people are getting that right, that's my cue. And knowing what the students don't know is as important for me as knowing what the students do know. So again, the ability, now there's lots of apps that you can integrate into Teams using hyperlinks or those that are natively integrated there. And it's well worthwhile taking a chance to explore through those. So I am now at the end of mine. I'm going to just flick over my